Now, I think that we can all agree that by far one of the biggest box office failures of 2023 for Disney was Indiana Jones 5: The Dial of Destiny, but nothing is going to get worse, in my opinion, than Snow White 2024 that is still slated for release by March of next year, with an official trailer all set and ready to debut by this early September. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into the subject, shall we? Now, one thing about Snow White 2024 that has been really getting, of course, a lot of, backlash and causing Disney to fall into damage control had a lot to do with those leaked photographs that erupted online a couple of weeks ago, and ever since then, basically Disney, such as the board, Bob Iger, many of the executives, they've all been scrambling on how to really tame the backlash. Now, there's been quite a number of issues arising between Disney and director Marc Webb, who's handling this movie. Now, you guys may or may not know Marc Webb, but he actually handled the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. He was a director for those films. So let's get into exactly what's really going on here with Snow White 2024 and specifically director Marc Webb and why he's having a lot of problems right now behind closed doors with the higher-ups over at Disney, specifically what they did to the film that's bothering Marc Webb and that has been causing rising creative differences between himself and, of course, the business end of the spectrum of Snow White. Let's get into this. Now, with Snow White 24 going through many adjustments right now by Disney to tame the backlash, one significant development has much to do with director Marc Webb having growing issues with Disney after the latest choices to adjust the film that is now creating an ongoing conflict between Marc Webb and Disney higher-ups. Now, Webb recently got caught up in a creative struggle with Disney that he is reportedly very furious with them about, and the reason being behind all of this was by how Disney deleted two crucial scenes in the film that were described to be Marc's best work that he did for directing on the film. Now, this was described to have been a scene that involved a flashback of the evil queen destroying White's father in the beginning of the film that was going to set up the true demise of her father and setting up the secret, of course, between herself and Snow White and the evil queen being the stepmother and exactly what comes between all three of those characters. The scene actually involved a moment in which the evil queen turns her father into stone with the use of a magical weapon and stores the father away in a vault somewhere. This was loosely inspired from the Happily Ever After 1989 film in which the evil queen's brother holds the ability to use his cape to turn others into stone. Now, Marc Webb reportedly shot a 7-minute flashback scene that was going to dive into the backstory of Snow White's father, who was actually called King White in the movie. Now, let me just stop here for one moment about all of this, is that we know that Marc Webb, I know a lot of you guys out there are going to have differing opinions on him, but there's a lot of people that like this guy. There's other people out there that heavily dislike him as a director. People often say that they hated the Amazing Spider-Man films. Other people like them. But I've seen that there's a lot more people that dislike those movies rather than they enjoy them. Now, the fact that Disney got Marc Webb on this film, I think was obviously a bad choice on their end, coming out of the fact that Marc got caught up in a lot of, highly criticized movies and such. And so I think at the end of the day, the fact that he met with creative differences here between himself and the Disney higher-ups for the backstory of King White just goes to show you how dismantled this movie really is. Basically, Disney has no idea what this movie's about, where it's all going. We already know that re-edits are already beginning to revamp and pretty much, get kick-started there. And Marc Webb's having a lot of creative issues with the big wigs over at Disney. Now, that brings us to the next segment here. Now, we know that basically Marc Webb is the one that made the call. And it's not just because of Bob Iger and the Disney higher-ups. Marc Webb actually fully supported Rachel Zegler becoming Snow White, the new take on the Seven Dwarfs, so he's not a true saint in a sense of being a director for this film. This is a guy that does support and fully loves the fact that we have the seven dwarves the way that they are, as seen in the leaked photographs in this up-and-coming movie. Marc Webb loves that idea, and I think that's all the more reason to not support this guy. That's just my own personal take on things, but moving onwards, let's get into the actual other piece about all of this. Now, Marc Webb reportedly shot a 7-minute flashback, like I said before, for the beginning of this film. However, Webb named King White in the script, however, and his name was truly never given. But that part of the Snow White story that was deleted also by Disney that angered Marc Webb over this had to do with 2 deleted scenes. The flashback and one in which Rachel Zegler's Snow White breaks the spell on her father being encased in stone toward the beginning of the 3rd act of the film, setting up the ending. Both of these scenes were cut out of the movie recently, and her father is going to have a next to nothing impact on the story this time around in the final cut, as Disney embraces their re-edit of the film moving onwards. Marc Webb was battling to bring back these 2 deleted scenes recently, however Disney absolutely refused, as they want to cut down the running time of this film, as it was nearly a 3-hour movie. Now let me pause here again. The fact that they were going to make this into a near 3-hour film is insane. Alright, now I've said this many times before in the past, that movies like this, if they're near 3 hours long, you're setting yourself up for failure, because the longer a movie is, you're going to have less people that attend. I mean, it's just a given fact. With the exception of other movies out there, like Oppenheimer, and other films like The Batman, where a lot of people tuned in, movies like Snow White that's close to 3 hours or at the 3-hour mark, it's not going to attract a lot of people, especially if it's getting bad press. So I guess it's an effort to a degree for Disney to cut down on the running time, but it's not going to fix anything. And I know I've said this so many times, but no matter what you delete out of this movie, no matter what you cut or change, if it has those 7 dwarves as we've seen them in those leaked photographs, this movie is a box office failure right from the get-go. And that's exactly why this movie has no chance of breaking even or even getting close to breaking even. I mean, there's just no way. There's absolutely no way it's going to do that well. So basically what Disney is banking on is that they are banking on people that have not seen the 7 dwarves in the mainstream media or online and through those leaked photographs, and they want to capture that by reducing the appearances of the 7 dwarves in the upcoming trailer and keeping them very much minimized or in the background on the up-and-coming posters and the cardboard standees for the theaters, stuff like that. We already talked about that weeks ago. This is where things get interesting, though, is that Marc Webb actually dislikes Disney for deleting these 2 major scenes that was going to set up King White, Snow White's father, and his backstory, and how Rachel Zegler was going to save him, and how that was going to basically be a portion of her story about rising to become a leader that was actually taught by her father. So I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
From night to